2, 1.
We'd like to welcome you to another edition of Grok Talk, brought to you by New Hampshire's leading conservative blog site, GraniteGrok.com. We are your feared extremist, right-wing, hard-charging, gun-toting, opinionated, outspoken, rabble-rousing, letter-writing, radio microphone stomping conservatives and rational libertarians. So get ready for more news and opinion you could only get from GraniteGrok.com.
Grok Talk.
All right, welcome to another edition of Grok Talk. We have a pretty full slate today, a lot of things going on. Max Abramson's going to be here in a few minutes. Rep Frank Edelblut's already here. He's running for governor. We're going to start off with him. We also have David McIntosh, the president of Club for Growth. John Zimrak will be calling him about the jihad in Orlando. And Dustin Siggins will be joining us by phone later on in the program to talk about an alternative, a pro-life alternative to Planned Parenthood called Stanton Healthcare. So, interesting week. We were going to start with some legislative stuff, and of course, it's a good thing that Frank's here because he was there this week. And
I was there.
Good morning. And the first thing you told me when we came in, and this is really important because I don't know if anybody's heard this yet, tell us about editing the permanent journal.
Well, so this came up at the end of our legislative session on Thursday, and it was, I believe, a surprise to most legislators. So one of the representatives apparently was working with someone who had been in the legislature and had offered a prayer, because as you know, the way the legislative session works is, we start with a prayer, the Pledge of Allegiance, the national anthem. And so the individual who had offered that prayer contacted this other representative and said, hey, I looked in the permanent journal and I noticed that my prayer had been edited. The words of the prayer had been edited. And I don't know the exact phrase, but it was something he had prayed for the children, both born and unborn, who had been who are affected by the opioid crisis. And someone had edited out the born and unborn portion of that prayer. Right. It feels like political correctness, doesn't it?
Oh, it sure does. That's amazing.
So, the speaker, in addressing that, came down from the podium or whatever it is and joined us in the well. And he explained the process where they edit out language that is potentially politically insensitive, or I don't know, it felt like political correctness
it's
gone askew.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was most disturbing to folks because, this is a historical record. 100 years from now, folks are going to read that permanent journal, and it says permanent journal, so you imagine it's a good record of what took place, and they're not going to know that those particular words are important to us. So because they've been taken out of it. So we've really flattened the historical record. So, I was saying, imagine the Declaration of Independence edited for political correctness, how could we do these things? We have no idea of what our history is.
Now, we can only assume that they've been doing this for a while.
Apparently, the way the speaker explained it, this is kind of a tradition of the House, although, if it is such a tradition, it's curious that so many people were unaware that this was actually taking place.
Like, say, Speaker Bill O'Brien, for example. Was he aware of the tradition? Do we know?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
I didn't ask him.
I'll have to ask Bill.
Yeah, you have to find out if he knew.
Bill, tell me about the tradition. Put your headset on.
All right.
So
start broadcasting.
Yay. Don't mind the air sound. We have a fan in here because it's hot.
Because we have a meeting next door.
Right. So maybe it has been going on for a while.
Maybe it has, maybe it hasn't. I think there's going to be a lot more discussion and investigation into how the policy is working, what it's doing, what its intent is. Because obviously everybody was a bit taken aback as a result of that.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I thought so.
I would expect them to be if the prayer in the House says born and says born and unborn, you'd expect that to be part of the record.
Did they take Jesus out? Did they?
Well, in fact, I wasn't going to go there, but I think the example that Sean used, in discussing this from the well when he came down was that someone might offer a prayer in the name of Jesus Christ, and that may be offensive, and so that may be something that would be edited out. And so, again, we have to just be the political correctness, gone askew. And
I think that if those are the rules, then there's an awful lot of things that went on this year in the legislature that I find offensive that I would like captain the record.
So the interesting thing is, I don't know if this is the rule so much as this is the tradition. And, there's sometimes those things. We have a rule manual, and I don't believe this is part of the rules, but this is part of the tradition in terms of how the House has functioned.
It seems to me that, I've only been doing this for
long enough to know,
going
right?
on close to 10 years.
Okay.
That if somebody was editing the House record, somebody would have told me that by now. It just seems like I would have heard it.
Right.
All the libertarians, all the free speech advocates, all the people who,
but who would discover it? How many people, you go in, you have your legislative body, and we conduct business. How many people go back and then read the permanent journal and try and compare it to what they thought they said or they didn't think they said?
That's true.
So it could be one of these things that it just so happens that you had someone from the outside. They were very explicit in terms of the language that they used, and they wanted to go see their name in the permanent journal, so they checked it. And they said, wait a minute, it's not the same.
that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, where's the rest of my words? Right.
All right, so you're running for governor.
I am.
You and everybody else.
It's not too crowded.
No, it's not too bad. But I think I want to say it's nice to see, you got a lot of different people interested in captaining our little ship of state.
Right.
What would you say? And now, my experience with you, honestly, is limited to the speech you gave at the 603 Alliance Grassroots event.
Okay.
April of last year.
Right.
And I thought it was a great speech. That was one of the best speeches there. I snipped it out. I posted it. I did that with everybody.
Thank
but
you.
I was particularly fond of your remarks, and I certainly hope that's how you want to govern. What separates you from all these other people?
Well, really, the first thing you need to know about me is I'm not a politician, right? I'm a business guy. I'm a job creator. I have not spent my my life kind of wandering, growing up or wandering the halls of government, hanging out with government bureaucrats. Nor have I kind of planned this career from the beginning, from my infancy. Like, if I'd have this move and then this move and then this move, that it will position me to be able to become the governor of the state someday. That's not kind of where I was going. In fact, my career.
Keep going.
Keep going.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, sorry.
I was just telling Mike he's breathing on his microphone.
Okay.
Well,
So much for being subtle.
yeah, that's all right. I'm not subtle. Take out the two before.
Well, let me know if I'm breathing. If I stop breathing on my microphone, let me know. So I've not spent my whole career trying to figure out a career in politics. I started my career. I'm an accountant. Started my career at a company called PricewaterhouseCoopers, which many people know. Great company. I'm a trained CPA. Did audits of large Fortune 500 type companies. Worked on their numbers. Got into the bowels of their numbers. Understand the details of numbers. Not afraid of those. Help big companies with waste, fraud. The kinds of things that help them run better. And was having a successful career there. Left. I don't know if you want my whole history, but then left there and. It was a great company, and in fact, I think I was doing fairly well. They offered me kind of the brass ring of that, which was the opportunity to become a partner. But at 28 years old, you're thinking, there's got to be more to life out there. Got to figure it out. Took a job as a chief financial officer for a company called Niagara, small public company. There about 3 months and began to realize that this company is not all on the up and up. Discovered some problems, potentially criminal activity, certainly unethical types of activity. I had to do the right thing. A tough decision, not tough because you have to make the right decision, but tough because you don't know what's on the other side. I'm 28 years old. I got 2 kids, one on the way. I think might have this rising career, and all of a sudden I'm confronted with this, what am I going to do? And so, I went to the board of directors, reported the findings, ended my career with that company. And then actually, so you imagine, I'm thinking to myself, my life's over. I got 2 kids, one on the way. I'm 28 years old. I thought I was a rising star. Turns out my life is now in meltdown. And I have to figure out what I'm going to do. So I did what every red-blooded American would do, which is I started a company. And that was a great story. Living the American dream. Start the company at the kitchen table with my wife, who we met this morning. And the company grew, hard work, great people, grew the company, over 800 employees, operating in over 20 countries, tens of millions of dollars of revenue, end up selling that and exiting in 2009. And I still to this day, what a blessing to have been able to live that dream. I pinch myself still. And joined a group in Boston called Common Angels. So basically, continuing to work with job creators, people who want to create something, make something happen. And so I help them now to realize that dream. For people who don't know what angel investing is, We have benefited from the TV show Shark Tank because now everybody knows what it is. They're like, oh, you do Shark Tank? But honestly, it's not nearly as glamorous because basically what I do is I read lousy business plans as our vocation because you got to like filter through about 300 ideas before you get to something.
Yeah, you're like a magazine editor or a book editor. You read thousands of manuscripts, or you start to read them, and then you're like,
This one's not going to work. Exactly. There's nothing here. Right?
Where 90% of the business plans look like a cartoon with the aliens at the whiteboard, and there's a big gap, and then a miracle happens.
Well, all charts go up, right?
Well, yeah. That and the parabolic increase in or is it hyperbolic?
Hyperbolic, exactly. Where it ramps up in the end.
Increase in revenue, or the hockey stick without the benefit of Michael Mann.
Right. So then after that, though, so I still do that, but I joined the legislature. Been in the legislature for about a year and a half now in my first term. Served on 3 committees: Child and Family Law, Pension Reform, and Finance. And because I felt like I wanted to give back, I wanted to do something for the community. Honestly, I've got 3 kids who graduated from school, and it's just not as good. If they were trying to start a business like I had the opportunity to start a business, I don't think it would be as easy for them without a roadblock. So, thinking we can do something about this, and quickly realized that if we're going to get something done, we need the corner office. I have a lot of experience in terms of running things and making things run really well. Honestly, I see the government should be invisible to us if we're doing our job, if we're functioning within our constitutional bounds and inefficient in what we're doing. We're just getting stuff done. You don't go out and say, like, how come the roads aren't plowed? Because the roads are already plowed. How come this or that? Because you just make it happen behind the scenes. Your interface with the government doesn't have to be this traumatic
and
experience.
How come the libertarians aren't in jail? Because we already did it. I mean, seriously, obviously, making the government run efficiently is a double-edged sword. You want it to be small and run efficiently.
Absolutely.
Not to have too much of an agenda and run efficiently.
Correct. Well, but so in my mind, efficiency and small go hand in hand. We're not trying to create large, and again, you have to operate within inside the bounds of what the your responsibilities are as a government anyway. So
it's like a business plan. If you try and do stuff that's way outside of your plan, if you have mission creep, soon enough you're not doing what you're supposed to.
Stay on mission. Very important.
And in this case, you have the benefit of having 2 constitutions to constrain you.
I do.
What would you say, in the interest of making the state more business friendly, or in getting the government out of the way, essentially, are the biggest barriers in New Hampshire to, say, business creation or job creation?
Yeah, great question. Thank you for that. So we all agree probably here that government doesn't create jobs, but government creates an environment in which people are willing to lay down their hard-earned cash as an investment to try and create jobs, right? So individuals are making those decisions, and I feel personal about that because that's what I do, right? In other words, like I have to feel confident in a business, say like, okay, I'm going to invest my money that I worked hard to earn in order to try and create something. In terms of business, we have some real structural types of problems that we need to deal with. We're at 2.6% unemployment, which is really, really low unemployment. But what that doesn't tell us, that statistic, is we're 39th in terms of GDP growth, and we're 49th in terms of productivity growth. And so we have to fix that. There's no opportunity for businesses to grow. We've pretty much tapped out our economy. And so what we really need to do is to work on, the workforce, because we've not seen population growth. We don't have growth in the state. So we need to do some structural things in order to get the growth going again with jobs. Healthcare costs out of control. They are the highest in the country, and there's some reasons for that. We've put up some barriers to competition in this state that prevent.
We've been doing that for 15, 20 years. Yeah.
Even longer, right? And energy costs, another high problem. Business taxes, in spite of the reductions in taxes, we still have the highest taxes in the New England area, and just overreach of regulation. One of the examples of this that I sometimes talk about is in my town, I also serve as a water commissioner. And in our town, we have a separate water board and a separate sewer board. And so if you want to hook up, you got to make an application for the water board and an application for the sewer board. The other day I'm looking at them, they're the same information. Essentially you just need the basic information. So I was like, why don't we combine these applications and we'll just have a little checkbox. Water, I want sewer, I want water, and I want sewer. And again, you thought I was asking for the moon. But that's just a simple example of how we can make the government easier to do business with. It should be simple. And we have to be able to entertain those things.
Biggest problem, I see this, not just Democrats, I see this rhinos, even many of the Republicans. even some of the most conservative, socially conservative, what I find is you go in, someone has a right to do something by right. When I went in, I had a bill that simply would have guaranteed by right that all these startups, internet service providers who want to lay down cable or broadband, all they wanted to do is by right be guaranteed the right to lay down cable where there's already cable or fiber there. They want to compete in public rights of way, and it was like pulling teeth. It was like you have to come in with the companies, the stakeholders, the lobbyists. Now, this would be a startup. How would you have startups come in and beg for permission? How can you have companies that have trivial amounts of startup capital to work with that don't even have a customer base yet or have a very small customer base, and now they have to come in and explain to legislators? And what I was thinking about all these corrupt socialist third world countries, because I travel the world a lot, you have to know people, you have to beg for permission, you have to be buddy-buddy, you have to hang out at the same golf courses and the same country clubs.
You got to bribe them.
Yes. Or you have to be related to the right people. And then once you make the loot, you've got to share the money. They're stealing from the common people. They're stealing from the startups.
And you know why they get deposed, right? Because they're not paying the right people.
Oh, yeah.
But it's the same thing here in New Hampshire.
I was going to say, to connect that, we have cartels, occupational cartels. We have lots of occupational cartels in New Hampshire.
I use the term guild.
It's a good term, too.
And guild is the proper term. It goes back to ancient London.
You had to
be
bend
on
your
the
knee
inside.
to the guild.
You had to be on the inside to ply a trade. It's a bit like being a lawmaker. You've got to come up through the ranks. You've got to be blessed by the right people in order to be qualified for higher office. Please, the reason Trump's so...
Wait a minute, are you sure about that? Because I missed that part of the memo. I don't know if you just heard my story, but somehow I didn't hear that.
I did hear your story, and some will say you're not qualified, and I don't believe that.
Right.
And it's why Trump's resonating. You don't have to agree with Trump on everything, but the one thing he's doing is disrupting the status quo, because he's bulldozed literally right through all those layers of approbation and qualification that you're supposed to get on the way up.
Bill Weld, who was the first ever governor, or first in a long time, first governor, two-term governor in Massachusetts. He won re-election, 71% of the vote. He's now the Libertarian vice presidential candidate. He would always talk about the guild mentality. And it's
Massachusetts had it bad.
Oh, it's still bad, but
we're working on it.
It is the entitlement mentality of the left. There are 1,000 people a day on average moving from Democrat states to Republican states, and they're leaving Democrat states because of the insanity, the corruption, taxes are out of control, roads and highways are falling apart, urban sprawl, so on and so forth, corrupt judges. People are leaving. They don't know why it's so screwed up. They don't link the two issues together, but the single biggest reason is there are no jobs. And part of the reason is occupational licensing. Part of it's the regulation. Part of it is it's just too hard to compete with entrenched good old boy network industries, utilities. You can't start up a health insurance company to compete with the entrenched.
Well, so really, though,
yeah. So health insurance is a special case in New Hampshire because it's been made even more complicated and even larger barriers to entry. But the occupational licensing that you mentioned, in most cases, no licensing is required. If you want to do well in something, you're going to train yourself appropriately. Otherwise, your reputation will not be worthwhile. But these occupational licensing arrangements are basically a closed shop, a guild, as Frank says, for the benefit of those who are already on the inside, to keep out those who want to be an upstart, who want to open their own hair salon, nail salon, whatever.
Well, I mean, the thing that it does more than anything, though,
is it 300 hours of training to shampoo hair?
Right. Well, there is that potentially, but I mean, what it does is it stifles innovation. I mean, look at an example here in New Hampshire. I mean, we had Uber coming in and wanting to operate in our cities, and what did we do? We shut that down. So here's a service that could really be a beneficial service to many of the elderly in our communities, because you have lower costs and reliable transportation to get to doctor's appointments or any of these other options. And so what did we do? We basically shut these opportunities down. And I think we've shut them down because there is a mentality that some folks in New Hampshire have that say, well, if we don't rock the boat, if we keep everything the same, then that's a good thing. But what they don't realize is when you're standing still and the world is moving on, in essence, you're falling behind. So we need to be able to, open up our market so that we can move forward and we can, let's get into the 21st century here.
All right, Mike, I'm going to cut you off. We're going to take a short break. We're going to come back. We'll talk some more about your campaign, and then we'll get on to some legislative stuff, so stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Warning, this is not a safe space. I repeat, this is not a safe space.